I want to say a few words about Maaser Kesafim, what's called the tenth, the tithe of money. Of course, we know that the Torah requires a farmer to take off Maaserot. There are in fact two different types of Maaser: a tenth that is given to Levim, and then another tenth that is in certain years given to the poor, and that other years is eaten in Yerushalayim, in holiness and purity. There are all kinds of laws of Maaser that have to do with food that grows. Moreover, at the time we had the temple, there was also another Maaser that was from animals. Every 10th animal was counted, whichever animals were born that year, and they were brought as karban in the temple and eaten by anybody who wanted. It wasn't a korban that only Kohen can eat. Rather, the owner and whoever is invited to the Suda, to the meal, would eat that Maaser. So all of that is well known, and there are very clear laws in the Talmud and all of that. And none of that applies to us today, meaning with regards to the Maaser of animals. Obviously, we cannot do that because we don't have the temple. And as for the Maaser of food, in theory, it does apply in the land of Israel only. But what happens is the Maaser that is supposed to be eaten in Yerushalayim, we cannot eat today again when there is no temple. These laws don't apply. So what is done is a pidyon. It's redeemed in a certain way with money. That's what the Israeli companies of food do with any growth and with fruits, grain, whatever they grow. That's what they do. They redeem the Maaser Sheni. Whereas the first Maaser is supposed to be given to Levim. Why don't we do that? That one might ask that we should be doing even today, since we do have Levim. There are a few reasons why it's not really done. It's separated from the crop, and Levi is usually given, I think a lot of times they arrange that the Levi is given a certain amount of money, a relatively small sum, that he sells basically the Maaser back. This Maaser does not have any holiness. It can be eaten by anybody. So the Levi prefers to take some money instead. And this is a fair deal, since given that the Levim today work like everybody else, and also there's no guarantee today who is a Levi, therefore this is the preferred thing, and Levim are happy also. Who needs really a lot of grain or a lot of fruits that they'll all of a sudden get? Most of them would rather agree, at least the ones with whom the arrangement is made, that they will instead get some monetary compensation, especially since nobody can really prove that they're truly descendants of Levi. But what we do take away from our usually salary, right? Most people work for money, they don't grow vegetables. Most of us are not farmers, and outside the land of Israel anyway, the Maaser doesn't apply. So most of us do something else, and that is called Maaser Kesafim. Everybody knows about the idea to give a tenth of your salary to various charitable causes. And that actually is not so well discussed in the Talmud at all, which is very surprising. The thing that actually applies to us the most today and throughout most of our history, right, throughout almost 2,000 years of our exile, that actually is the thing that's least discussed. Even the most basic questions about this Maaser are not resolved. For instance, is it just a good custom? Is it a rabbinical law? Can it be actually a biblical law? But we do have an interesting statement in this week's Parsha. Yaakov says to Hashem, after he saw the dream and after Hashem promised him all the good things, he says that everything you'll give me, I'll take away the Maaser. I'll separate the tithe. So that's the main source of separating tithes from everything. Kol asher titen li, everything you give me. So while the Talmud is a little bit unclear on this issue, there is a sugya in Tractate Ta'anit that is somewhat related, but the Tosafot there does point us in a direction based on a midrash of taking away the Maaser of what you earn. And of course, today when Jews aren't farmers, and already for most of our history we weren't farmers, this is the only Maaser that matters to us the most. And the laws of it are much more unclear, as I said. There are no tractates that deal with it. There's a special tractate in Zraim that deals with Maaser, a different tractate with Maaser Sheni. And there's a Jerusalem Talmud on it, Yerushalmi. But there's absolutely no tractate or no sugyot in the Talmud discussing Maaser Kesafim. But the laws of Maaser Kesafim, most poskim agree that most rabbinical laws, and maybe just a good minhag, basically come down to that from time to time, every half a year or every year, you need to make sure that from what you earned, that a tenth is separated and given to charitable causes. The two main questions that I want to discuss is what's considered charitable causes, question number one, and secondly, what do you separate Maaser from? Do you separate it from pre-tax, gross salary? Do you separate it from your from your net salary after the taxes are taken off? Can you subtract anything else? When it comes to taxes, there are all kinds of laws in every country. What you could subtract from your salary, what's considered off tax. Sometimes they allow you to subtract a certain amount of money that is used for medical expenses or for kids' education. All kinds of things are sometimes charitable donations, by the way, also in America at least, are excused from tax. It's subtracted from your salary, and this is not taxed by the state and by the federal government. So all kinds of laws exist. But what about the Jewish law? What can you consider your salary when you have to take away a tenth? Or ideally even a fifth, that would be even better, right? It's also learned from our verse, Aser asrenu lach, I'll take a tenth, and it says double lotion, double language. Aser asrenu. So Chazal say ideally one would take away a fifth of the salary. And give to charitable causes. So the two questions are: what are charitable causes for this, for the purposes of this law, and how do you calculate the amount of money from which you have to separate the tenth? So both of these things are not obvious at all. The Rama, the main Ashkenazic authority, seems to say in Shulchan Aruch that the money from which you separate the money that is given, the Maaser money, has to be going to the poor. So according to this, one would say that if you want to, let's say, donate to a building of a synagogue, to a writing of Sefer Torah maybe, or prophets, some synagogues have prophets also written, meaning not a book that they bought, but actual scrolls similar to Torah scrolls, prophet scrolls, all kinds of other donations, kiruv work. It's not clear whether, or a building of the mikveh, for instance, very important purpose, but it's not clear at all if this is considered the money that can be used for the poor, because none of these seem to be for the poor specifically. They're very needed. They may be sometimes even more needed than helping the poor, but whether it's considered, according to Rama, the right type of donation to fulfill your obligation of Maaser Kesafim, it's not clear. So what some poskim suggest is that when a person starts taking away Maaser, he or she would actually make a stipulation, a tanai, that they will take off Maaser under the condition that they'll use it for any kind of charitable purpose. What's considered charity, what's considered tzedaka, not necessarily to the poor, but anything that helps the good causes, like I said, building synagogues, mikvahs, publishing sfarim sometimes, anything that's used for good charitable causes. But we also want to consider it as part of it. That's the condition under which we separate the Maaser. That's ideally the case, that the person made such a condition, and then they can for sure rely on those opinions that it can be given not just to the poor. Now, how do you count the Maaser? This is a very fundamental question, obviously. So there are some opinions, even though it's not a majority, who consider that the salary for the purposes of Maaser Kesafim is what is left after the minimal needs are taken care of. So a person who barely lives from paycheck to paycheck, who basically uses up practically all of his or her salary for the main things that they need, the food, the clothing, the apartment rent, and things like that, might have to only give a tenth from what remains, which can be very, very small sums of money. It's hard to rely on this particular opinion, but if a person has no other choice, then it's better to rely on this than not to separate Maaser at all. Most opinions hold that you have to separate Maaser from the full salary. But as regards to taxes, according to most opinions, taxes, obviously, since you don't get that money, so taxes are not part of it. So we're only talking about net salary, not gross. There are some opinions that differentiate between various kinds of taxes, like a tax, for instance, on the house might be different. We're not going to discuss that right now. The point is that the main taxes that the government takes off from you, you could consider it not your money, basically. They take it off from you anyway. I mean, if they return you later, some people get after the year is over, they get tax returns, so that you should separate Maaser from that money as any money that you would be getting. Just like, for instance, if you got a reward, if you got a bonus package from your company. Obviously, if they gave you money, what's the difference if it's part of standard salary or they gave you a gift? They gave you a bonus for good work. For that, you have to separate Maaser. So similarly, if you got money back from the government, so they took too much tax at first, now they're giving you back some of it, so then you separate the Maaser from that. There's also another idea that might work for some people if they really are struggling and don't really have extra money to give to tzedaka. And that is if they have small children after 6 years old. So some poskim hold that this is considered also tzedaka when you basically spend it on your own children. So if you're taking care of a family with children who are after 6, since the letter of the law is that you don't have to support children after 6, in old times some of them started to work at that age already. So it could be that you can fulfill your obligation of Maaser by giving them. So you separate the Maaser and you use it for your kids that are older than 6. Before 6 you can't do that because it's your obligation to take care of little kids. But after 6, since you're not fully obligated to take care of them, you might be able to use Maaser money. But again, this is only considered a big leniency and only is allowed when there is absolutely no other choice. If a person can give Maaser to regular tzedaka causes, that would be ideal. And for people who make a lot of money and have a large salary, that should be done. But there are people who simply are struggling and therefore can rely on this particular opinion. And certainly even more so in regards to elderly parents. If they're poor and they need help and you have no other way to help them, then you're permitted to use Maaser money. Again, the money that you separated, your tenth, you could use to help the elderly parents as well. And how much more so other relatives. Some people, for instance, help their married kids already in cases that they need and they're poor, or especially if a person is learning Torah. Sometimes the father-in-law might be helping, or the father. So all of the specific cases, of course, one should ask a Rav, but there are ways out. If a person has no extra money and is struggling already, then there are ways to use the Maaser money for basically keep it in the family kind of thing. So that's what I wanted to mention based on the verses in this week's Parsha, in Parshat Vayetze. Wanted to mention a few of these ideas. Of course, the details are far beyond the scope of this little video. And if you like this video, please press like and please subscribe to our channel.